talking about automation, integration, and connecting things together. So more specifically in this session, this is kind of an overview of what we want to cover. So we're focusing on integration, so making things talk to each other. This isn't just WordPress plugins. This could be WordPress sites, non-WordPress sites, apps, anything like that. So how do we connect things together to build automations that save us time as administrators and site owners, as well as make things easier for customers, users, students, whoever they might be. We're looking at how automation and workflows, so things like funnels, can make it so that you have fewer requirements for customization. There are a lot of integration plugins out there, and usually they do one specific thing very well. And anything you want on top of that would require some kind of development or feature requests. And they're very narrow in terms of their scope. So we'll talk about how you can overcome that and what solutions are available. If you've ever wanted to connect Groundhogg to even more tools. So a Groundhogg already comes with a lot of integrations. There are dozens. There's widespread support, but there's always more you can do. So we'll look at how you can connect Groundhogg to even more so that you can enhance the funnels that you're building and connect more tools and automate more without outside plugins or development. We'll also take a look at how you can automate routine admin tasks. So while this will focus a lot on the Groundhogg perspective and what you can do with Groundhogg by extending it with other automation tools, we'll also take a look at, in the wider WordPress context, what else can you automate? What else can you turn to workflows? Since you're already looking at a lot of automation, particularly in marketing with Groundhogg, what else can we do? Where else can we introduce automation? Okay, so I had the quick introduction just for context. So I represent Uncanny Owl. I'm one of the founders. We're a team of about 13 that's headquartered in Toronto. We've been around since 2013, and we currently have 8 plugins. There are 2 for automation and then 6 for Learndash. Across our different plugins, we're on about 50,000 WordPress sites right now. We're probably most well known for our Learndash product. So if you have done any work with Learndash, you're probably very familiar with our toolkit plugins. And today we'll take a look at some of our other products. So we are the creators of Uncanny Automator, which we launched in late 2018 and has grown significantly to connect all kinds of different things together in a lot of creative workflows. All right, as we go through the session, we will take questions. So Gregory will be monitoring the chat, and I will check in with him periodically because I can't see the chat immediately. But if you do have questions, post them in the chat and I will take a look at those. Gregory, is there anything so far, or are we good?
Nothing right now, keep going.
Okay, all right, excellent. So let's jump right in, maybe with defining the context of what we're going to talk about in terms of automation in this session. So by automation, we're looking at routine tasks that are typically performed manually and making them happen automatically. A simple example here of an automation might be a user requests a WordPress password reset. When they do that, they click a link, they enter their email address, and WordPress sends them an email. So there's no intervention from an administrator to send a link or to set a new password for them. So, but building on that concept, the basic idea is if something happens, we can make something else happen automatically. So a more complex example might be a user purchases a product, payments collected, an email confirmation sent, an orders created, and the user gets access to a site. We don't really have to think about those. Those are all automatic. We just expect them to work, but it is an example of an automation, and there is more you can do with that kind of example. So we're going to look at automation in terms of how you can make things talk to each other. So basically, our intent with what we're doing in automation is to almost build a universal language so that we can have different products coded differently and intended to do very specific things, communicate with each other. So you're probably familiar with funnels in a Groundhogg context. We're talking about those workflows, automations, recipes, zaps. Those kind of cover the scope of automations that we're looking at. So again, you're probably familiar with automation in a marketing context if you're attending the session, but let's take a look at what else could you automate on a WordPress site. And later in the session, again, we'll come back to Groundhogg and see how this all fits together. All right, some simple use cases that maybe you do manually now, but are examples of things that you could easily automate. The first one, sharing new posts on social media. So when you publish a new blog post, you probably want to share it. We'll take a look at a simple example after this of how you could easily do that. Right now, though, for a lot of sites, this would be something that you do manually. Another example would be personal learning paths in your LMS. So if you're delivering online courses with whatever plugin, it could be Lifter, LearnDash, LearnPress, Tutor, whatever, there might be situations where you want to modify the learning experience based on someone's behavior and their demonstration of knowledge acquisition. So an example here, like out of the box, you couldn't do something like when a user fails a quiz 3 times, then enroll them in a remedial class or notify their manager, things like that. Or if someone demonstrates an existing mastery of a subject via pretest or something, a high score on a pretest, then those plugins out of the box wouldn't allow you to automatically complete a course and advance the user to the next level. So these are examples where you can automate personalizations, but maybe not out of the box with those types of products. Maybe you want to build custom reports out of records that are collected in your WordPress site. So every time someone completes a lesson in a course or gains a membership level or a tag is removed from a user, you want a permanent record. These are things that you could automate to make it easier for you to manage the site. Another example, communicating with social communities. So if you're using something like BuddyBoss, then maybe you want some activity on the site to notify users or trigger some kind of message or notification. Instead of doing these things manually and posting and connecting all the things that take a lot of time, you could automate them. You can also connect sites together. So an example here would be you want to sell products on a WooCommerce site, but you don't want WooCommerce slowing down what's happening in a learning or membership site. So you have these sites created independently, but there are ways that you can have a purchase on one site, create an account on another site, enroll somebody in courses at a membership level. But how do you do that? So now that we've got some examples, I'm going to show one here. So this is what we would call a recipe. And I just wanted to walk through like how you, and I'll talk more about the product and how you would do this in a second, but I'm just going to walk through what automating something like this looks like. So what I'm showing right here is a recipe that's saying when a user publishes a blog post with any tag or any category, the taxonomy doesn't matter, then we want to tell WordPress to publish a post on Facebook with an image that includes details about the post. We want to notify the rest of the team in Slack that there's been a new post published. And 10 minutes later, then we want to publish a photo to an Instagram account. So it's time back to that first example, and it's a situation where these are things that you would typically do manually that could be automated. So I'm going to jump into a demo. Well, sorry, before that, let's just talk about Uncanny Automator itself. So this is a product that we have that kind of makes these things possible. So Automator is a freemium WordPress automation plugin, which means that there is a free version that can be used as much as you want. There's no limitations. It's available in WordPress.org, and you can start connecting these things. So for example, like for logged in users, you can have a lot of triggers that add and remove tags in Groundhogg in the free version of the plugin. There is also a pro version, but for now, I'm just going to talk about automation and what you can do with automation. So it connects all these different things together. There are over 80 built-in integrations. So again, it's leveraging what Groundhogg cannot already do, but extending it to other products and apps and tools. The concept is similar to what you would see with Zapier, except that it's WordPress native. It sits in WordPress, the data stays in WordPress, and it connects to a lot more inside WordPress. Everything is inside the site that it's installed in. And one of the big goals is to reduce custom development and extra plugins by making these things that would otherwise be impossible easy to achieve in a couple of minutes by building these automated workflows. Okay, now let's jump into a demo of what this means. So for this first one, I'm just going to walk through the example first. And then I will actually show how it's built. So let's walk through the objective first, and then we can actually build it together in the session. So what I'm looking at here is what's called a recipe. And again, it's kind of similar to a funnel. It can have different steps. And we're saying that when something happens, then other things happen. So what we're saying here is that when a user passes this particular pretest in LearnDash, so an LMS plugin, when it happens once, as soon as that happens, we want to mark the entire course that it's associated with complete for the user. So this is an example where we're using a pretest to assess knowledge and then using an automation to advance the user and giving them a custom learning experience. So we're marking that course complete. We're sending an email to the user. So we want to tell the user, hey, you achieved a passing grade, so we're going to advance you to the next course, or you've completed the requirements. We're going to send that email out. Then let's say we want to tag the user. So now Groundhogg can run any funnels or do any automations on its side based on completion of the course. And we're going to take the user to a My Courses page. They've fulfilled the requirements, so we're going to take them back to where they need to be. And we use the recipe to achieve all of that. Now, what we're also saying on this page is that it's going to run for logged in users, because anybody who's completing online learning activities is going to be logged in. And we want it to run only once for each user. So this would be a situation where maybe the user has to, or is completing the quiz multiple times. We don't need to trigger multiple emails. We don't need to retag the user. So it only makes sense to fire this once. So we're going to do it once per user, but it can run an unlimited total number of times. So that's a pretty simple example, and I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes walking through how to build it then. So what goes into this and how we can make it unique to the user and a way to kind of personalize the experience. So for any recipe, I'm just going to go ahead and create it. So I'll add a new one, and we have to decide, okay, are we going to run this recipe on someone who's logged in? So there's associated user data. Or is it going to be for everyone, which means that they might be signed in or signed out? We don't know, and there's not necessarily user data. For this one, because it's an example of an online course, they're always going to be logged in. So I'm going to click logged in, and then Automator knows that there's going to be associated user data. So I'm just going to call this one simple title. So we'll add that. And again, I'm going to say that we're going to use LearnDash. And what I'm showing here is, so on that last screen, sorry, let me just go back. This shows the plugins that are installed that Automator can connect with as part of a recipe. So it looks like a short list here, but it's going by what I have installed and connected. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is LearnDash. We want to base it on completion of the course. And under this list, I can see everything that I can do to trigger a recipe or automation or a funnel and have it run actions against that. So in this example, the trigger that I want to use is a user passes a quiz. And then because this is targeted to a specific quiz and course, I have to specify which quiz it is, because I don't want to run this for every course and every quiz. So I'll go ahead and save that. And now this recipe is set up so that we know that anytime somebody passes that quiz, it will run the actions that I define here. So under actions, the first one that I'm going to do is that completion of the associated course. So let's go ahead and choose LearnDash as the integration, because that's where the course is. I'm going to mark a course complete for the user. And then here it's prompting me to choose the course. So I'm going to choose Intro to Groundhogg. I'll just mention here, like, you can work with a lot of dynamic data. So here you can see I can use a custom value. This would let me pass in a custom course ID for more advanced recipes, like maybe you're receiving data from a third-party LMS system or an HR system, so that you can perform actions dynamically based on whatever course this might be. You can reuse the recipe for other courses. For this particular one, I'm going to choose that course. I'm going to save it. When I do that, it's going to make it live. So now if I turn this recipe on now, it would just, when a user passes that quiz, then it would mark the course complete. You can have multiple triggers and multiple actions. So I'll go ahead, like this isn't enough. I need to notify the user. Like it's going to be confusing if they complete something and nothing happens and they don't see it, but behind the scenes, the course gets completed. So the next one I'm going to add is an email notification. So there are a lot of built-in like Automator and WordPress core functions related to roles and messaging and developer things. Sending an email is under WordPress. So we'll go with the WordPress integration and say that we want to send an email. And then everything about the email we can define here. So when I select that, it pops up all of my available options. And if I go through each of these fields, we have what's called a token system so that you can choose any dynamic data. So if I click over here on the right, then I'm just going to, so you can see more, I'm going to expand these. So we can use any data here. It's taking data that's common. So again, these are variables based on the user, based on the post, based on the system. There's a lot of different dynamic data or variables we can pull from. So for this particular one, I'm going to use the user's email address. So under common tokens, I'm going to say, okay, send it to the user that just completed this quiz. And it populates this token. And then I'm going to say in a subject line, let's say, congratulations. Sorry. And then I want to pass in the name of the quiz they just passed. And for this example, like it could be hard coded, but I just want to show how you would use a token here based on the trigger. So here you can see this is my trigger and I can use data from that in my actions. So in this case, I'm going to use the quiz title. And here I'm just going to notify the user, hi, and I want to personalize it. So I will use their first name and I'll use the token again for that. Hi, first name. Congratulations on passing. Sorry, it's hard to type. I've got the wire over top of me. And then we're going to use quiz name again. All right, so that's a simple example. You'd have more detail here, like you can proceed to the next course, or here's a link to get started with your next step, that kind of thing. But I'll go ahead and save that example for the email. And then, of course, we want to connect all of this to Groundhogg. So then it can run its own funnels and do whatever it needs to on its side. So we're going to go ahead and connect that. So that in this case, we're going to add a tag to the user on completion of that quiz. And we're going to say that the intro course is completed. This is a list of my tags. I'm just going to add that tag. And then as a last step, then we will go ahead and add the redirect, which I'm just going to say is to a My Courses page. Again, you can pass dynamic data in. So that's a pretty complex recipe. And then once you're done with your triggers and actions, you'd be able to tell it, okay, run this once per user, which I will do here. And then I can take the whole recipe live. And that's it, it's published. So now going forward, anytime someone completes that pretest, we can deliver that personalized experience where we mark the course complete, we tag them in Groundhogg, and we send them a confirmation email with next steps. And you can really do anything else or add anything else you want as part of this. That was a pretty complex demo. I'm just going to stop for a second and see if there are any questions, just generally about the recipe creation.
Yeah, there was a couple of questions about integrations, which people have gotten the integration link for Uncanny Automation, so that should not be a huge deal. One, Richie asked, can I use Uncanny Automation to sync user data from a non-WordPress website via webhook?
Yeah, so actually I just stopped sharing for a second. I'm going to go through all the questions and just take a look. Okay. So there's a question about H5P activities. So we have a lot of LearnDash plugins. One of those is called Tincany. Tincany collects XAPI and SCORM information statements. And I know this is not applicable to most people on the call, but the short answer is yes, H5P content types that can pass XAPI data can be used to trigger recipes based on verb, based on scores. So the answer there is a qualified yes, depending on which content type you're using, and if it can support XAPI or Tincan. All right, next question. Yeah, sync user data from a non-WordPress website via webhooks. Absolutely. We just recently added support for all kinds of different webhook data types, methods, as well as nested data. So yeah, pretty much anything that can send data in, we can use to create a user, run actions against, whatever you want. So the answer there is yes, you can sync the data in. Just be cautious from a security perspective. It's not really recommended that you pass in things like password data. It's better if you're creating users, then there's a token where you can send a password reset link. So it's like one click to set a password, which is a more secure way of handling things like that. Let me scroll down a bit.
And actually, Ryan, there's a question that a couple people are asking about. Does Tincany and Uncanny Automation have any sort of integrations?
Sorry, say that again, Gregory.
Does Tincany
Tincany. Yeah.
Do they have any integration?
Yeah. So the question from Patricia and yeah, I think Chris might be on here too. So Lifter we don't currently support, but we are looking at some additional support this quarter. I'm going to say Lifter is not likely this quarter, but there's a very good chance in Q2. Right now, it is a LearnDash only product though. Of our non-Automator products, the only one that is generic and works with Lifter right now, besides Automator, sorry, is Uncanny Codes. Uncanny Codes is our only plugin besides Automator that integrates with Lifter. Thrive Apprentice. No, let's say no for Thrive in general, and you should use webhooks for Thrive. Okay, so I'm going to switch back then and just go through some other points, and then we'll get to demos again in a second. So I will share my screen again. Okay, and we're back. So let's switch back to the presentation. So I went through that demo. As we were going through that, you might have seen some parallels to Zapier. So you may be thinking, well, some of these things, but not all of them I could do with Zapier. So why not just use Zapier? Let's cover why you might want to use a WordPress plugin for automation solution. First, there's way more support for WordPress plugins. So we connect dozens, I don't know, it's about 60 WordPress plugins together that Zapier would not support. So and also we have like hundreds of triggers and actions for those that, again, they wouldn't have support for. Their WordPress plugin in particular has very limited capability. There are, again, specific integration plugins, like most large plugins do sell, connect this product to Zapier. But again, you need a plugin for that. It's extra cost, and it does one specific function. So it's very limited in scope. And if you're connecting 10 things to Zapier, then you're going to end up with 10 plugins that are probably all premium. Data privacy is another big reason. So with Automator, anything you're passing between plugins, anything you're running on your site is local to your site. No data comes to us. We don't see that. So you can control everything. The exception here is when we're connecting to something like Google Sheets or Slack or Twilio, then of course you would have to send the data to that service and it will go through the API. But otherwise, if you're just connecting WordPress plugins, you have complete control of your data and what Automator is doing, like the code's GPL, it's not obfuscated, so you can see exactly what's happening and what we're doing. So there's a free tier with unlimited use. You're not paying per recipe or how many times you run something. Everything's unlimited, even in the free version. It's fully open source, no transaction costs, and you can connect them together. Even in our free version, we allow passing data to Zapier through webhooks and through an integration that we have. So you can use both and kind of minimize your costs on the WordPress side by using Automator to connect things together, including with Groundhogg. So where does Groundhogg fit in then? The last example, we had some tagging, but let's take it a bit further. So one of the big things is that it opens up additional integrations. So I'll go through those, I think, on the next slide, but there are a lot of things we support that allow connections to Groundhogg that just wouldn't be practical for vendors to support normally. Again, this is the focus of our plugin, so it makes sense for us to, build right now over 80 integrations, then up to 100. But for plugin vendors where it's not their focus, it's really hard to maintain that level of integrations and that number of plugins. So examples of things we could do that Automator or Groundhogg on its own perhaps couldn't do. So maybe we can add or remove a tag when a WooCommerce subscription trial expires. So not just based on purchase, but getting into really granular things like a paid trial expiring. Then we can trigger things or add a tag, or trigger some funnel that tries to capture the user if they didn't go beyond a trial, or they cancel after a certain number of months. We can have custom behaviors there. Maybe in an LMS plugin, a user achieves a quiz score, or they complete a certain number of attempts. So instead of just simple triggers that you might get with an LMS plugin or Groundhogg that's based on passing or failing or attempting a quiz or completing a quiz, then you can get into a specific score if it's greater than equal to all those conditions, or even granular things like attempts. A user watches part of a video or completes watching a video. Let's say they watch 20% of a video in Presto Player, and you want to capture that and start a funnel based on that partial video viewing. Then you can do that. And again, this ties back to one of the questions. We can do a lot with webhooks, with multi-dimensional data and different formats. So, and you can connect all of this to what you're doing in Groundhogg. So I talked about how we support some more things than Groundhogg does. These are examples of integrations we've got in Automator that would allow you to connect these things to Groundhogg just in the one plugin. So out of the box, if you have Automator installed, then you can connect all of these things and have them linked to adding and removing tags. Or an example might be if a tag is added in Groundhogg, then register someone in a Zoom webinar, or RSVP on their behalf in the events calendar for an event. You could do things like that where it just kind of supports more and can take you a bit further with integrations. Okay, just before I jump into some more demos, and I'll check time quickly, are there any more questions? Let me just take a look.
There was one question really that was about what's the difference between the free and pro versions.
Yes, I will absolutely cover that so you have a sense of the difference. I'll go through that a bit further on. Yeah, let's cover that further on. And yes, the posting from Richie was very helpful. So yes, thank you for that one. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Okay, let's take a look at another demo then and how you can use it with Groundhogg. So let me share again. Okay. All right, let me go back. So let's say, and I'll go through the example again first, and then we will go ahead and build it. So let's say you want to do more with Google Sheets and with onboarding sessions. So for this particular example, we will say that when a student tag is added to a user on the Groundhogg side, we want it to trigger some actions, but only if the user has also submitted on an onboarding form. So the use case here would be that you want to onboard a new student, but only once they've been recognized as a student and they've completed a preliminary form. So we'll walk through that. And then down here, I want to say, okay, if the user completes those two activities, then I want to add them to a Zoom meeting. So I'll register them here. And I want to pass the record to Google Sheets so that I can do my offline reporting. Outside of Groundhogg, outside of WordPress, I have this persistent list of data that I'm collecting on new students. And then you can see I've added a little condition. Like when I hover over actions, this is part of what's different in Pro. Then I can add conditions. In this case, I want to say, okay, I don't want to capture any records from people at uncannyowl.com because they're going to be test users or internal users and they don't need to attend this meeting, so I'm not going to register them. So this is saying anyone with that email address extension does not get invited to this meeting, which is fine because they're test users. So this is how I can manage it with conditions. Now let's go ahead and build this one again. So it's really fast, just so that you can see how we're passing in dynamic data, and especially how we work with Google Sheets. So again, this is going to be a logged in one because there's user data involved. There's a contact and they're submitting a form while signed in. So I will go ahead and make it logged in. I will call this one onboarding, and I will say that it's going to start when the user is tagged. So I'm going to look for that student tag in the list of tags. It's right here. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to say, so it's based on that tag plus when they submit a form. So in WP Forms, which is my example here, I'm going to say user submits a form. You'll also see here, like this tells you what's in Pro. So one of the differences, like if I needed to say, this only applies to users with a job title of manager, then I could do that with the Pro trigger. But for this example, I don't care. It's any submission. As long as you get the form in, the onboarding form, then we're going to go ahead and run the actions on that person. So that was really quick to set up the triggers. And now I'm going to say, okay, for the Zoom meeting, I'm going to see a list of Zoom meetings after I say I want to add the user to a meeting. So I'm going to add the meeting, and I'm going to say it's the intro to Groundhogg meeting. And I'm going to add that. And this is where I can go in and say, okay, for the filter, like this is where we can add rules that are dynamic and based on the user. So I could say, you know, if there was some user meta value, then I can go through like and find what I want to use. If I said there was a user meta value of job title and its manager, only invite them, then I could do that. In this example, I'm going to say, okay, only proceed if the user's email address does not end with uncannyowl.com. So we'll go ahead and save that condition then. And you can add multiple conditions. And if you do that, you can say, you know, and or how you want to qualify it. And I'll just go ahead then and add the secondary action. So this is one that's a bit more complex, where we're connecting to Google Sheets. Now I'm already connected. If I weren't connected, it would prompt me to authenticate my Google account so I could pass data into it. So right now it's connecting to Google, it's seeing my drive, and it's asking me to select a sheet. So I'm just going to say for this one, actually, I'm going to use, sorry, let me just confirm. I'm going to use Groundhogg. Let me find that one. Okay, there we go. Groundhogg demo. And I'm going to use the only worksheet that exists. And then as a first step, I want to pull down the columns there. So it's doing a query to Google Sheets there, and it's looking at, okay, here are my headers. And again, this is just a simple report that I'm collecting for people that are students, have the tag, and have submitted the form. So I want to catch their first name, and I want their last name. Oops, let me scroll down a bit. And I want their email address. So we've got their email right here. And that's all I really need. So I'll go ahead and save that. But you can see again, like I could pass in data from the form, from Groundhogg about the user, advanced things as well. So I'll just go ahead and save that. And I want this to always run for everybody on unlimited times. So I will go ahead and turn that on. And now it's running, and that's it. So now once I set it up, I never have to worry about it again. It will just run and keep running and accruing these runs here. And anytime we want to, we can go into, let's show you an example. We can go into the logs and see exactly what's happening. So if I want to know that somebody's done that pretest or not done it, or there are errors, then I see all that detail here, but I can even drill down and see, okay, the user completed this trigger. Here's when they completed it. Here's what happened. And then I can see here are the 3 things we did for that user. So this is when they completed. And if there were errors, like even from an API, we would collect the API records and pass them in here so that you have a complete view of everything that Automator is doing on the site. And for troubleshooting, it's pretty invaluable to see exactly what's happening. Now, I'm going to switch back, and then I was going to look at another demo. But before I do that, are there any more interim questions?
Yes, there are. There's one from Vicky who asks, how do you add something like a Groundhogg appointment completed as a trigger?
Sure. So in terms of the triggers and actions you see, it's only what we've currently built. So in a situation like that, if there were an appointment completed, then you would have to tag the user accordingly so that it connects with a trigger or action that we have. Something specific like that is a great feature request, but we only show in the plugin things that we built explicit support for. So if you don't see it there or can't currently manage it with tags, then definitely send us a feature request and we can take a look at it that way.
Awesome. A question from Richie, who asks, is there a way to pass word count of a post as data to Google Sheets?
No, there's not. So I will take, let's just use that last example. I'm going to share my screen again. And it's weird. I don't see, this is in, oh yeah, it's in Q&A. I was just looking in the chat. Okay, sorry.
People can post it different ways. It depends on which way people want to do it. That's why I'm keeping an eye on all of that. So if you have questions, post it which way is convenient for you.
Sure. All right, let's go back into one of the recipes. So let's take a look at I'm just going to make a modification to an existing one. So let's say it's this one. I'm just going to go back and add the token for a user posts something. So a user publishes a post. Let's use that one. Okay, so I'm going to use it for any post type, anything. You can make up custom post types. Like it could even be a way of announcing there's a new course available. So you could just use course post types. So let me go ahead and do that. And then let's go back. Let's say I had more data in my Google Sheet. So now that I've done that, you can see there's this new token section for the post trigger that I've got. And under that, you can see the current tokens that we support. So you could pass over post type. We've got, post excerpt is one we added recently. Everything about taxonomies, post title, ID, URL, content, as well as featured image data, but there's currently none for word count. So to support something like that, we would have to explicitly add that token for any triggers you'd want it for, so that we could pass that dynamic data in. Yeah, so these are all explicitly added by us. They're not things that we generate. Like we have to link these tokens that we build to the triggers. So all of these, anything you don't see here would have to be something our developers build. Okay, I think we're good then, Gregory, aren't we?
Yeah, we're good for questions right now.
Okay. Yes, you could do that. So that comment there, if you're using Google Sheets, you could create a web app too that would potentially pass data back to Automator or Groundhogg, whatever, using the webhook. An incoming webhook trigger could capture it and then use it wherever you want it. So yes, you could use Google Sheets to do that kind of thing based on post content. Okay. So we've got about 20 minutes. I'm going to switch back and let's look through another example then with Groundhogg again. And this one's kind of interesting. Okay, I'm sharing my screen again. So for the next one, we showed adding tags to Groundhogg so that you can trigger funnels based on the tags. But let's take a look now at how you can trigger things based on a tag being added. So actually, I did that one. Sorry, I'm gonna switch to that one had the trigger. I'm gonna switch to another action. So for this example that I'm gonna show next, just in the interest of time, what we're gonna do here is we're gonna show that you could have funnels and tags and membership access and things like that based on a simple code redemption. So you can do whatever you want on the Groundhogg side, but maybe it's restricted access or you don't know someone's email address. Like maybe you're sharing a code at a conference or something, and if someone enters the code, then you want to fire things based on a tag. So you can link a particular code to running all those things. It could be to like you're using membership capabilities in WP Fusion that's connected with Groundhogg so that you restrict access to certain videos. So just like you're unlocking some kind of bonus for someone that does something that you're trying to target. So the example we're doing here is a code, or a user redeems a code from a code batch. we're using one of our other plugins for that. And then when that happens, the simple example is add a tag, and then Groundhog can do whatever you want for that user based on that tag getting added. It's just a simpler alternative to something like, a coupon code in WooCommerce, or entering a code in a form, but you have no way to generate that code, or it's not unique or something like that. So this is a way that you could make these things happen based on unique code generation. It could even be, you're selling codes to an organization as a way to get their users into courses or get them restricted access, membership levels, things like that. So let me just start back from the beginning then for this one. So I'm going to quickly show the example of generating codes. So let me just go ahead and generate a code. I'm just going to call it Groundhog batch. I'm going to say that we're going to control the redemption behaviors based on Uncanny Automator. It's going to control what happens when someone redeems a code. And I'm just going to say, okay, each code can be used once. I'm going to auto-generate codes. There are going to be 20 of them. And let's say that they're all 20 characters long. So just a really simple example. Oh, I'm going to use uppercase letters too. You can see an example of the code here. And I'm just going to generate that. So really quick example, I kind of rushed through that code generation piece. But the key thing is it automatically takes me then into the Automator recipe so that I can control what happens when someone redeems that code. So let me just add a title again. And I'm going to say, okay, when someone redeems a code, one of those 20 codes from this batch that I just generated, then let's go and tag them in Groundhog. You could even remove a tag. Like if you want to trigger something based on code redemption, you could do that as well. But let's say I want to add the tag. And in this case, I want to make it Automator user. So I know who they are based on the code redemption. And then that's it. I take it live. And now I have a way of tagging someone and triggering things in Groundhog just by simple code redemption in a form. So you could use WP Forms or Gravity Forms or Formidable or whatever you want. You could drop in a simple form, and based on the code redemption, then we tag the user, and you can make anything you want happen to that user in Groundhog based on that tag. Okay, let's switch back then, and I'm going to go ahead to the free version versus pro. So let's talk about first, is the free version enough? And for a lot of people, yes, the free version is enough, and it's a good way to try things out. There's completely unrestricted use of adding and removing Groundhog tags in the free version. You have unlimited recipe runs and unlimited recipes that connect WordPress plugins together. So for any integrations you see in our free version, the triggers and actions that are in the free version, you can do as much as you want with them, unlimited times. So yeah, if you have recipes that only require the free version, then it's sufficient. It supports logged in user recipes as opposed to recipes where users are created. And it has full outgoing webhook support. So if you want to connect Groundhog to Integrately or Integromat or Zapier, which it already supports, but anything like that that you want to connect to that may go beyond default webhook support, then you can use the free version and it's going to work. In terms of the pro version, why would you upgrade then? Obviously, there are a lot of extra triggers and actions. We saw the form example. So usually when we're doing more complex things, like looking at specific values, then it would be something that's in pro. Triggering recipes based on tags in Groundhog, that's only in pro. So the actions to add tags, remove tags, that's in free. The trigger side is in pro. User creation. Let's say that we want to, again, have the example of you've got easy digital downloads on a marketing site, and you have a membership site that is independent of that, where you want to create a user based on purchase in ADD, then that's something that would require pro on the receiving side. Conditional actions. So where I had the email address example, that's in pro. Scheduling, if you want to run actions on a certain date or you want to delay things, that's in pro. Unlimited API use. So this is where we connect to things like Google Sheets, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Slack, all those third parties. With a free account, you can try those things out, but for unlimited API use, then it's Pro. And then there are things like magic buttons and links. So based on a button click, you could add a tag to a user or remove a tag, or if they click a link, and you can drop those anywhere on your site in any page. And then there are additional developer tools in triggers and actions so that you can, call any function you want from inside a recipe or have it triggered that way. All right, so getting back to how can automation as well as Automator save time and money. A big factor is that integration plugins are very limited. Usually, if you're getting something from the vendor, like connecting a plugin to Zapier, for example, it does that one thing. Or you're connecting an LMS plugin to a social plugin, then it supports some of those things in ways that they define, and you can't do things like add delays. So an example here might be if you want to sell a course in WooCommerce, then you would use an integration plugin to connect WooCommerce to the course enrollment. And that's all that plugin does. But let's say you want to enroll the user in a second course 2 weeks later based on that purchase. You couldn't do that because the integration wouldn't support it. So you'd be looking at custom development or asking for feature requests. And then let's say that you want to also add the user to a membership level as part of that purchase. Well, the integration plugins that you'd normally use will only connect two things. So then what do you do? So it makes things difficult. And if there are conditions like a certain role or a job title, then you're kind of stuck. So it reduces custom development, and time is a big one. So we do connect or collect anonymous usage stats from users. It's optional, but based on what we do collect, then people on average run about 400,000 recipes per week. So even if each one of those recipe runs is just saving a few minutes of manual effort or customization, that's saving people a lot of time. And recipes generally, and you can see from my demo that they usually take less than 10 minutes to set up. And the average site only has 4 recipes, which seems low, but you can then set them up in a couple of minutes, let them run, and they will continue adding value. So even if you're not using many recipes, the ones that are there can be significantly helpful.